The debate surrounding 100 men rallying together in order to defeat a single gorilla exploded on the internet in the way it did because it sparked a very primal curiosity in people. What is the mileage on teamwork and collaboration when facing an overwhelming threat? And today, I'm going to be applying that very same question to Jujutsu Kaisen. Could 100 sorcerers defeat Gojo Satoru, the strongest sorcerer of the modern era, and a force of nature that could topple countries single-handedly? In attempting to answer this question, I'll be placing Gojo in scenarios that continue to increase in difficulty and scale in order to know for sure whether or not he'd be facing the same fate as a silverback, or if his solitudinous strength is enough to overcome any number of threats.
Round 1, fight!
The first and least difficult round focuses on 100 sorcerers that epitomize what a grade 1 should strive to be. And as the quintessential grade 1 sorcerer, using Kento Nanami as a baseline for this performance would be most appropriate. Anything below your typical grade 1 and the individual gap between them and Gojo is so massive that it isn't even worth discussing. But 100 Nanamis, 100 Meimeis, 100 Kusakabes, how would they, or some unique mix of this aforementioned tier, approach dealing with Gojo? One might immediately dismiss their initial tier because of statements from Meimei or Nanami that quite heavily harp on just how easily Gojo could take over Japan and overthrow Jujutsu society as we know it. Even a fellow special grade like Geto finds the act of killing all non-sorcerers a task that a younger, less powerful, and less experienced Gojo could handle pretty casually. And while that sentiment is important to properly estimating the extent of Gojo's abilities, the very nature of 100 sorcerers of the grade 1 variety collectively attacking at once does present an entirely different threat than a couple dozen grade 1s being handled and spread out over the course of an entire country. And we have also seen that while Gojo is impressive, he is susceptible to unique strategies or being overwhelmed with information like anyone else. His threshold for this is just quite a bit higher than the norm. With a number of characters like Kusakabe, Meimei, or Naobito, anti-domain measures can be taken in case of Infinite Void being pulled out, and we even have statements that somewhat imply that even this level of combatant can harm Gojo under the right circumstances. Take for example Meimei's Bird Strike, an attack that is consistently shown to punch way above her respective weight class. In chapter 102, Meimei states that no one aside from Gojo has ever survived an attack from Bird Strike. And while this statement in isolation doesn't mean much, as we have no idea who she used this on in the past, when paired with what she says in chapter 244, it's clear that Meimei is of the belief that even uniquely powerful special grades like Sukuna and Gojo avoid her attacks because it presents some level of threat to them. If she's to be trusted, a correctly timed Bird Strike coordinated attack could harm or even outright kill Gojo while his technique is unusable post-domain burnout. Kusakabe would find himself in a similar position because he too has a statement that kinda suggests his flurry of slashes could harm Gojo in a real serious way. Nanami believing that while no one can technically withstand the attack, Gojo doesn't need to, which to me implies that he doesn't think that Gojo is just sitting there and tanking it without infinity, and that's quite the sentiment. And while Sukuna not showing extensive damage from Kusakabe's flurry somewhat contradicts this hyper-lethal gassing up, it is interesting enough to at least consider. So say the 100 sorcerers are composed of some mixture of Nanamis, Kusakabes, Meimeis, and Naobitos. With all of these points being presented, do they stand a chance? Assuming 25 of each character for simplicity's sake, they get absolutely wiped off the face of the earth. Well, technically, characters like Kusakabe should be able to survive a domain due to his simple domain refinement. There is absolutely no way we can determine with any certainty that Wee-Wee's barriers could withstand Gojo's domain potency. Falling Blossom Emotion exclusively works on short effects that attack physically, and Nanami doesn't have the ability to counter domains in the first place, meaning that 50 to 75% of their strike force immediately dies if Gojo even opens Infinite Void. At best, this would leave 25 Kusakabes and 25 Meimeis to fight within his barrier, but considering the stat amp that Gojo would receive and the lack of vulnerability to Bird Strike, they'd get absolutely slammed. Now, if we're getting particularly crafty, it's possible that they have a few of their forces lie in wait outside of the range of the domain in order to shatter the barrier immediately after its creation. But this requires you to assume that Gojo couldn't locate them with this 6 size, which is highly unlikely. And even then, Gojo, without the use of his technique, is quick enough to somewhat keep up with Sukuna within his domain, so no attack that they have in their arsenal would even sniff him. In the best of scenarios, Gojo immediately opens Infinite Void and lobotomizes 25 Nanamis and 25 Naobitos. His barrier is then shattered, and then without the use of his technique, he proceeds to beat on the remaining 50 grade 1s. The funniest thing about this as well is that their strategy only really works if you assume Gojo isn't able to use his technique for some reason, as while Bird Strike and Kusakabe's Simple Domain Flurry can possibly hurt him, they need to be able to get past Infinity, which would only be achievable via some sort of technique burnout. But Gojo doesn't even need to bother using his domain against these guys. Not only do they not have domains of their own, but he genuinely speed blitzes and damn near one-shots most of them before they even register what's going on. Naobito, being the fastest character in this tier, is potentially faster than Jogo based on Dagon's statement, and while that's kind of impressive, all that means is that he maybe equals a techniqueless Gojo in speed, seeing as how we literally see him 2v1 Hanami and Jogo without being able to use blue for high-speed movement. Add the fact that a suppressed Sukuna was physically capable of contending with and outright beating on characters in the Shinjuku Showdown that are physically more powerful than the ones I'm talking about, and yeah, no matter how you slice it, they have no hope of winning. I'm sure this was largely expected, especially for the first round of combatants, but the gulf in power is genuinely astronomical. 1,000 or even 10,000 sorcerers of this level wouldn't be enough to make Gojo break a sweat.
Round 2, fight!
Now that we know your typical grade 1s won't cut it, it's time to elevate things a little bit. This next round will focus on characters that either on the basis of technique or raw stats are well beyond what you could expect from the likes of the Nanamis of the world. Some characters on this list like Megumi, Higuruma, and Todo represent the physical low end but quality curse technique aspect, while others like Kashimo, Ishigori, Hikari, and Urame present much of the muscle in the conventional sense. So the question is once again, can 100 sorcerers of this caliber get the job done? Well, as obvious as this may seem, this round 2 squad performs significantly better than the characters listed beforehand. For starters, the ability to open domains already puts exponentially more pressure on Gojo in combat, as at the bare minimum, he'll now be forced to defend himself in some form or fashion from the onslaught of character sure-hit techniques, and in the worst case, he'd need to expand a domain of his own in order to do so. Ishigori, Hikari, and Higuruma are important parts of this squad for that reason alone. While Ishigori doesn't have any domain refinement feats to speak of, the ability to force Gojo's hand of using Simple Domain, Falling Blossom Emotion, or Infinite Void is extremely useful in itself. And in Hikari and Higuruma's case, they are known for having domains that are particularly strong in clashes. Whether or not this means they can straight up beat Gojo in a battle of barriers is difficult to determine, but they'd probably be this tier's best bet at holding off the ensuing brain damage of Gojo's domain. Todo is a useful ally in just about every situation because of his curse technique, shrewd personality, and high intellect, so including a few of him into this squad is bound to make Gojo's job more difficult even on a basic level. If we're talking about Todo and Shinjuku Showdown, then it's quite possible that even with his enhanced perception and awareness, Gojo wouldn't be able to find any pattern in Todo's Boogie Woogie use. As we see from chapters 260 to 263, Todo's applicable range with Boogie Woogie increased significantly from what he was capable of before. While his original range is unknown, the revised Boogie Woogie allows Todo to teleport people from over 200 meters away, which is the minimum range required to be outside of Sukuna's domain, yet capable of saving those within it. Even more importantly than that, the ability to swap up to 50 times per second and freely change how many swaps occur per tap makes adjusting to this technique nigh impossible. Sukuna is only able to make accurate predictions and reads because he's experienced Todo's technique in action inside of Itadori's body, and even that experience didn't allow for him to truly understand Todo's triple bluff. For someone like Gojo, who's never even encountered the base version of this technique and could possibly be swapped with different fighters of varying builds, speeds, and fighting styles, there's simply no conceivable way he adapts to Boogie Woogie throughout the course of this fight, 6 eyes or no. So, as he tends to be, Todo would likely be the MVP of this battle in the event that they end up taking Gojo down. Aside from Todo though, Higuruma is probably the most important piece of the puzzle, at least if everything goes according to plan. You see, Deadly Sensing has a technique imbued within it that should be capable of stripping Gojo of his technique at least. Doing this could also potentially lower Gojo's curse energy efficiency and output, as we do have a statement in chapter 165 saying this is what usually occurs in the event someone's curse technique is confiscated, although we may need to discuss the efficacy of this plan when I go over how Gojo fares. But in Higuruma's case, confiscation isn't even the best outcome. If he's able to get Gojo the death penalty and gain the Executioner's Sword, a unique opportunity to kill Gojo in one swift strike presents itself. That is presuming that he can land it. This leaves the 3 stragglers on this list that I mentioned a bit earlier, Arame, Kashimo, and Megami. In Megami's case, I'm just bringing him to the party so we can send some Mahoraga foot soldiers to distract Gojo. Arame is just kind of here to get some cardio, as they don't have domain feats, physical feats, or a curse technique that's super useful in a fight with Gojo, at least with this technique in play. They kind of just embody this in-between clear grade 1 and special grade level of power that I mentioned earlier. Kashimo, especially in his base form, would kind of be in the same position due to his close range style of fighting getting completely dismantled by Gojo and having no domain of his own to press him further. With Mythic Beast Amber, I believe things get a tad more interesting, but he's also someone that would be used as a pawn to set up for more assured win cons, even at his most useful. That being said, this squad is pretty impressive, and unlike with round 1, I do think there's a conceivable way to beat Gojo if the cards are played absolutely right. Don't get me wrong, physically, Gojo is still destroying each and every one of these guys. I mean, he's canonically one-shot Arame before, Hakari's vomiting after a single punch from Gojo using blue, and everyone else on this list is either weaker than these 2 characters, or not so much stronger and faster that it should matter all that much. Surprisingly, Todo, at least in the Shinjuku Shodan era, is the one with the least anti-feats, as he never truly gets blitzed by Sukuna. However, that was a Sukuna that was also leagues below his full power, and as such, is a Gojo victim. So if he enters this battlefield on some vengeful shit where he's uncharacteristically out for blood, they might get blitzed into oblivion. If Gojo is a bit more in character and playful as he typically is, I think there is room for a plan to be executed. Just as he did with Sukuna, the opening play would be for Higuruma to open his domain and confiscate Gojo's curse technique. And while Gojo is far from being the epitome of evil like Sukuna, he's participated in his fair share of illegal activities, I'm sure. His domain in Shibuya essentially concussing all of those civilians might be enough to get his technique taken away on a battery charge. And if that's not enough, maybe the numerous occasions we've seen Gojo destroy public and private property will be the deciding factor in sealing the Limitless away. If curse technique confiscation does lower his cursed energy output and proficiency, he might be weakened to the point where even characters like Kashimo, Hakari, and Arame would be able to box with him. Although due to his hyper-focused control of cursed energy generally with the 6 eyes, I don't necessarily see this being the case. The only method to securing a death penalty on Gojo is maybe putting him on trial for the murder of Toji, but that is a decently easy defense of it being self-defense. The question just lies in whether or not you think Gojo would care enough to make that argument. Regardless, the baseline is that Gojo is leaving deadly sentencing without his curse technique, and as a result, no domain expansion. If this hurdle is cleared, pretty much all bets are off, and Gojo becomes a lot more vulnerable than not. The Hakari platoon could open their domains on him and achieve temporary immortality, basically ensuring that a decently strong group of characters can press him without fear of death. Gojo without blue, red, or purple is highly unlikely to be capable of one-shotting Hakari while he's in jackpot due to the automatic RCT. The likes of Arame and Kashimo become more viable options as well, as Arame's long-range ice-based attacks and Kashimo's lightning bolt are now things that can be used to further wear Satoru down. A way to quickly end this advantage would be for Gojo to just kill Higuruma and presumably get his curse technique back, but Todo's long-range Boogie Woogie would allow for him to be swapped out of the effective radius of Gojo's physical attacks, and if used continuously, would only serve to further confuse and disorient him. Couple that with the fact that Ishiguro could jump right in and use his offensive shirt to press Gojo even more, add some Mahoragas to the mix, and boom, that's an easy win, right? Well, not exactly. Not only is Gojo durable enough to probably just tank most of these characters' attacks with no issue, but his reverse curse technique is competent enough to just whisk away any serious damage these characters could cause. I also have to emphasize that Gojo with no curse technique is capable of avoiding attacks from full power Megano within his domain, so the difference in stats is still pretty disgusting. The only path to victory lies in the hands of Higuruma getting the Executioner's Sword. If that's used in concert with revised Boogie Woogie, it's extremely possible that Gojo takes a single attack and loses the fight. It truly only takes one successful attempt, and when mixed in with dozens of other sorcerers fighting and launching massive AoE attacks, I think it's possible. Without this though, I just don't think this squad has what it takes to actually kill Gojo. Hikari has pillows for hands, Kashimo even with Mythic Beast Amber isn't going to be able to land his one-shot techniques, and even Ishigori's Granite Blast would be far too weak to take Gojo out of the game. Even Yuta in Sendai Colony was capable of surviving multiple direct hits from Ishigori at his most powerful, so someone like Gojo who could survive the full extent of Malevolent Shrine through a mix of grit and healing should have no issue surviving. All they'll be left after that is winning the war of attrition, which Gojo is sure to do. Boogie Woogie may be what allows this fighting force to survive for longer than they normally would, but Toto will eventually either make a mistake or just run out of cursed energy due to spamming his curse technique, and he'll do so well before Gojo does. The only character here that can technically match him in a battle of stamina is Hikari with his unlimited cursed energy, but without Toto to keep him out of danger in between domains, whether it be 1 Hikari or 100, in base he's getting torn to shreds by any version of Gojo before Jackpot becomes viable once again. In this case, winning is technically possible given these pieces on the board, but it's highly unlikely that even 100 sorcerers of this caliber could take on 1 Gojo, which means it's time to ratchet up the difficulty once more.
Round 3. Fight!
We discussed the power of grade 1 sorcerers. They couldn't do it. We discussed the strength of sorcerers that lie in between the 2 highest grades. They couldn't do it. Now it's finally time to look at the official special grade sorcerers of Jujutsu Kaisen and ask, can they? A team numbering 100, built around the strongest official sorcerers of the modern era, Yuta, Yuki, Geto, and Kenjaku, could they possibly beat Gojo? Surely if any team composition could bring down the modern era's strongest, it would be this team. Well, let's take a look at some of the obvious flaws the squads of the past 2 rounds shared. For starters, the amount of win cons available to them through mostly conventional means was pretty much non-existent. Gojo's healing factor and reinforced body has so far proven too difficult to get past, even in the event that his technique isn't a factor. With the aforementioned special grades on the board, I do think that harming Gojo in and out of their domain would be possible. Notably, Yuta and Yuki would be the most physically capable of doing so. With Star Rage, Yuki's attacks should probably be able to do some harm to Gojo if her strikes were to land, at least based on how casually she tears through Kenjaku's defenses and sends him flying through Tengen's barriers. Yuta could pick up on any Yuki-related scraps that occur upon Gojo dismantling her up close, meaning that he too would have access to that ability. Even beyond that though, the fact that he could pretty easily cut through Kenjaku and, granted, a weakened Sukuna's body is enough for me to conclude that these two especially would have what it takes to finish a fight if the right opportunity presented itself. The next immediate issue that was being presented was getting him to be vulnerable to physical attacks in the first place. In past battles, this was extremely hard to come by and required extensive planning that could very easily fall apart. Not a problem for these guys. You see, 75% of this squad's attacking force have domain expansions, and Yuta and Kenjaku particularly are probably the first and only characters we'll talk about today with potent enough barriers to strip back Gojo's simple domain. With Kenjaku's barrier skill that equals that of Tengen, and the capacity to use the divinely difficult open barrier domain, I don't think it's a stretch to say that a mere simple domain would be incapable of withstanding this level of refinement. And in Okotsu's case, not only is he skilled enough to relocate his barrier and isolate targets within his domain, but his soul-swapping training with Satoru gave him the skill with barrier manipulation to pull off the same small barrier technique he used in his battle with Sukuna, meaning he too should probably be able to strip back a simple domain from Gojo. Yuki's domain refinement is unfortunately just up in the air due to us never seeing what it can do, so it's difficult to know what exactly she's capable of and how skilled she is with barriers in general. And Geto simply doesn't have a domain expansion to speak of. This means, in theory, that the special grade strike force can hurt Gojo, and they can also force his hand in domain clashes, lest he be assaulted by short abilities and forced to constantly heal himself. This means the final major task at hand is actually trapping Gojo or pinning him down long enough to successfully dole out this damage. With his curse technique in play, it's obvious that no one in the verse aside from Sukuna can keep up, but without his notable technique, Gojo is a bit more manageable. While he should still be faster than his fellow special grades on account of demonstrating some relativity to Sukuna, the fact of the matter is that everyone here, barring Geto, is capable of using RCT, and is probably durable enough to survive a beatdown from Gojo without the Limitless amplifying his strength or allowing for massive energy blasts. This gives everyone involved a very simple role. The Kenjaku division almost exclusively exists to clash with Gojo's barrier. By intentionally sealing off his domain, similarly to Sukuna later in Shinjuku, he can make it impossible for Gojo to escape without killing him. If all goes well, Gojo should counter with a domain of his own, and all barriers involved could subsequently be destroyed from the outside by someone like Yuki or Akotsu. The instant that the Kenjaku sent to clash with Gojo dies and the Limitless is out of the equation, Yuki's job is to open her domain and pour on as much damage as possible. This part of the strategy is truly reliant on her sure-hit ability just being a souped-up version of Star Rage and Garuda, which might actually be capable of pushing Gojo to ramp up the RCT speed. Either way, Yuki's getting smoked once Gojo gets his technique back and is getting bodied, of course. The Yuta cleanup crew would come by and munch on the remains in order to gain her technique, while a small militia of Suguru Getos throws themselves at Satoru. Once Yuta acquires Star Rage for himself, he'd open his domain, toggle her sure hit on as the main function, and either force Gojo's hand again or press him within his domain alongside the remaining, I don't know, 60 or 70 Yuki Kenjakus and Getos left. It's supposed to be a cycle of forcing Gojo to open a domain to protect himself, layering on damage after his barrier breaks, and Yuta making a mad dash with a dozen other special grades to capitalize on a vulnerable Gojo. And maybe through a mix of trial and error and really rinsing and repeating this process, they'd be able to wear him down to the point to an offhanded Garuda kick or Star Rage punch would be able to take him out. It's a plan that really hinges on leveraging the fact that Gojo can still experience technique burnout, as well as the sheer enormity of domain expansions that can be in play at any given moment. If caught up in their pace, I really do think a victory for these characters is possible. What's unfortunate for them, though, is that Gojo Satoru doesn't play by the beat of any drum but his own, and for all of his brute strength and powerful curse technique, there's a highly intelligent and observant wielder of that power right behind it, meaning that he's very unlikely to fall for this plan without a lot of effort on their part. I mean, one properly timed maximum output blue, one massive use of red, one hollow purple, unlimited or otherwise, and the foundation of this plan crumbles in an instant. Because Yuta is the only character here who we know for a fact can target an individual within his barrier, a jumping is only possible in mutual and authentic love. The other domain users have to box Gojo on their own for a bit for fear of eliminating their own allies before Gojo himself. And I'm sure y'all understand the problem with anyone not tied up like this guy boxing Gojo 1v1. I think this team presents the most consistent possibility for wins out of anyone mentioned thus far, but I couldn't confidently say that even 100 special grade sorcerers could assuredly beat one Gojo. Let's give this one last shot though. A bonus round, if you will.
Final round. Fight!
This bonus round is meant to switch things up a little bit. So rather than gather 100 sorcerers that all exist within one singular tier, the question becomes, gun to the back of your head, build a team that can take on Gojo that doesn't include Sukuna. The only limit is that I have to stay under the 100 person cap, and there can be no duplicate sorcerers as there have been in the other rounds. Do I survive? I'm gonna be honest. Hell nah, man. They're just gonna have to pull it. Because despite multiple feasible technical ways of harming or even killing Gojo in a scenario like this, like catching Gojo off guard with a stab from Soul Split Katana, trapping him with Yorozu's domain, or boogie-woogieing him into a Higuruma stab, the level of convolution required to get such an outcome is vastly outweighed by the stat difference present in the battle. The Six Eyes would allow Gojo to take note of all the characters truly capable of putting him in harm's way and dealing with him first. The only characters that I can confidently say press Gojo to use Infinite Void are Yuta and Kenjaku, considering their domain proficiency, but others with handy abilities like Yuki or Yorozu are out of luck due to a lack of feats. And we know that when the barrier user is skilled enough, a simple domain can outclass the output of a complete one. This means that Gojo would never feel pressed enough to expand his own barrier and wouldn't experience technique burnout. And as I've said more times than I care to count in this video, the longer Gojo can actively spam his abilities and remain untouchable, the smaller the chances of anyone actually winning gets. If you think I'm dragging it, I just want to leave you with this. In chapter 234, it is said that Yuta and Hikaru's interference should happen only if Gojo becomes weaker than the two of them. The fact that they don't step in at any point during this battle means that a domainless, reduced output, brain bleeding Gojo with one arm is stronger than Hikari and Yuta individually. and potentially even if they were working together. Yuta's probably the strongest guy on the squad overall, and Jackpot Akari has the greatest survivability of any sorcerer that's going to be on this 100-man team. They're both one blue amped punch away from showing you what they had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the rest of the strike force would follow suit very quickly. All 100 sorcerers might get speed blitz so bad it'll look like that one Quicksilver scene in X-Men. Once again, beating Gojo with 100 hand-picked sorcerers with an intricate strategy that is executed flawlessly is possible. But if I were a betting man, I'd still put my money on Gojo. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more like it. Depending on the reception of this, I may do more 100v1 videos for other anime and manga with overwhelmingly powerful forces in their verse. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.